So do you have your own favorite houseplants that you've been growing for this past year in 2023? If you want to know what my top 10 were for 2023, the plants that really got me going, stick with me and let's dive into it. Hi, my name is Memo, this is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see some of it behind me, it's tropical houseplants. So as we're coming into a bit more of the kind of holiday and festive season now, and people kind of slowly starting to wind down, I wanted to reflect back on what some of my favorite plants in my collection have been for the year 2023. Some of these plants I have owned for a long time. Some of these plants have probably only just recently in this last year come into my collection. So without further ado, we do need to get through quite a few plants. Let's dive into the first one. And I will clarify this by saying there is no particular order to this list. It's not a list of number 10 building up to number 1. They're in no particular order. But I will start with the glaringly obvious plant behind me. It has been on my top 10 plant list year after year for a good few years now, the Philodendron Esmeraldense. And you might be able to see some of its newest leaves are getting absolutely ginormous. I don't know if you can see that there. But the other thing that you might be able to notice here, and if not, I will be adding a clip so you might be able to see it closer. My Esmeraldense is getting ready to bloom. I know this is probably not that exciting for a lot of people. Most people will chop off the blooms or chop off the blooms basically because it's taking up a lot of energy from the plant where it could be bringing out new foliage. I've already had one of its lowest leaf go yellow and die off. But I have never had this specific philodendron bloom for me before. I have had other philodendrons bloom in my care before. Yes, I know that the blooms aren't particularly exciting, but there is something very sentimental in me that kind of goes, you know what? I have never seen you bloom. Please go ahead and do it once. I don't need you spending all of that energy all the time, but I want to see it bloom. It's a very special, special plant in my care. And I kind of, I want to give it that chance as well. And I thought it was quite appropriate. I've added in some interesting lights behind. So yes, that conveys my feelings about this specific plant as well. I will say one of its hybrids, which is at the very, very top, very difficult for me to bring down, but I will see if I can add a clip. The Philodendron Esmeralda spirit, which is the hybrid between the Esmeraldense and the Spiritus Sancti, and I'm pointing behind me because that's where the Spiritus Sancti is doing really well, and it's looking very Spiritus Sancti-esque, more so than it is looking like the Esmeraldense. When I first got it, and hopefully I've got a video that I can add here, it looked more like the Philodendron Esmeraldense than it did the Spiritus Sancti, but at the moment some of the newest leaves are coming in very spiritusy, so that's a very, very cool plant as well. So really, really enjoy it. Simple plant, easy, at least in my experience, to grow. It doesn't need things like moss poles. It will grow quite happily. It will get quite huge. And the pots are absolutely tiny down below, but yeah, almost like the mascot of the channel at this point. The next plant on the list, and it's not a plant that I can easily move. Some of these on the list I'll be able to come up and show you, but I will have a video here of this plant. And I did do a review recently of this plant, and I will put it at the top somewhere. This is the Anthurium pedatum, and the Anthurium pedatum for me is a bit of an unsung hero because, again, as I mentioned in that review video, I was actually after the pedata radiatum and I accidentally ordered the pedatum thinking it was the pedata radiatum. That's a bit of a tongue twister, but super glad I did. One of my easiest Anthuriums by far, hands down, to grow in this space. And the leaves are super interesting. It doesn't give me an awful lot of grief. It grows in semi-hydro, it grows in my coarse semi-hydro mix, and it gives me no end of joy when it's unfurling. It's a relatively fast-growing Anthurium for me, and I did get it from Ecuagenera in one of my unboxings. Hopefully I will find that somewhere and link it on the video. If I am not linking it at the top, it will be down in the description below for the people that have not seen that unboxing. But super easy plant, acclimated super fast in my care, so I had to add it to this list. The next plant is actually an orchid, and I've done my usual memo thing and watered this just before I started filming. Little side note, I filmed a lot of my content for over the festive season last weekend. I think I did either 4 or 6 videos back to back, and I sat down to start editing the first video today, and I realized with the new kind of camera setup that I was doing, and I had to, like, my viewfinder is now my kind of iPad essentially, and I put it slightly to the side, and I couldn't use any of those videos because it didn't feel right, because literally for most of the video I am looking at my iPad, which is slightly off center, and instead of looking at you, it just super annoying. Luckily I did this before I started editing and spent even more time for videos that I'm not going to use, but having to refilm all of that content at the moment is such deep joy basically. But side note, ended. This plant, very, very cool. So this is an Oncidium orchid, and if I'm not mistaken, I always like to leave the labels on for my orchids. This is an Oncidium Twinkle Mona. So obviously it's a hybrid, but you might be able to see, if I kind of cover my face a bit there, can you see the level of flower spikes? So the reality with this type of orchid is that you will get a plethora of blooms, at least that's what I've heard, and this I have only had in my collection 4 months now. So it's got technically 1, 2, 3 flower spikes, with most of them having a lot of branching that's happening on them basically. This is going to have small blooms in plethora, and the reason why I got this specific one, I'm really kind of getting into my more fragrant orchids. The blooms aren't that exciting, but it smells apparently quite spicy. And by spicy, I mean, I think it's got a smell something between cinnamon and clove. And I was actually hoping that it was going to bloom around this festive season, because it's kind of like reminiscent of all the like lovely, lovely festive food that's happening around this time of the year. It's all very spice heavy basically. So whether or not I'm actually going to get the blooms to open up now, probably not. And there is going to be that annoying thing that's going to happen, because normally I would go back home to Greece to see my family at the beginning of January. This time around, it's kind of happened that I'm going towards the end of January. I bet you anything this is going to kind of stall now, and it will go into bloom. I don't think this blooms for very long either. The blooms don't stay on for very long. This will go into bloom after I've gone. The person who's going to be taking care of my plants is going to experience these blooms, and by the time I come back, they will have all finished and died off, and I'm going to have to wait another year. Yes, the blooms. Mark my words. Because I am the most unlucky person when it comes to stuff like this. But hopefully this is going to bloom sooner than that and I get to experience it. But this is bringing me no end of joy. Still loving the mounts from North's Designs. And again, I'll see if I can link North's shop down below. Very, very cool plant. The plant itself doesn't look that interesting. It looks a bit grassy. There's little barblets down there. But the fact that this bloomed as early as it did, because I know a lot of the times for these types of orchids that are not your standard Phalaenopsis, you get them and it's usually a year or 2 before you can even get them to bloom. Even if they're kind of at the stage where they're ready to bloom, it can take a while for them to acclimate, to kind of come to the point where they're blooming. Obviously, I'm kind of saying this and they haven't opened up in blooms, but the fact that they've sent up a flower spike, I will take that as a win. Next plant on the list is the one that is right behind me here, and there's a lot of people that have asked about this, and I've started sometimes on some of my videos now to put an end screen at the very end of the video, and I've got a lot of the plants that are usually behind me where I film labeled so that you know what's happening. But because a lot of people were asking about the dark red leaves and the kind of slightly more autumnal colored leaves behind it, it's 2 different plants actually. So there is the painted lady right at the back, and then in the front is the Philodendron Dark Lord. And I wanted to get the Dark Lord for a very, very long period of time. Hopefully I will be showing you a video here of some of the close-ups of this plant, but it's got very, very dark green leaves, almost kind of black on the top, and at the bottom is kind of a very deep maroony, reddy, bloody red color. Basically, it is so cool. It's very soothing to my young, well, now very old, but when I was very young, I was a bit of a goth child. I'm showing my age because I wasn't even an emo, I was a goth. So dark foliage, love it. So yeah, very, very cool plant. And I will say relatively easy to care for. I think I've done a review and I'll link that at the top as well. Not a particularly difficult plant to grow. It's not the fastest growing plant, but generally the darker the foliage I find, the slower the plants tend to be, but 100% has to be on my top 10 for this year. The next one I do have to show you, and it is the Thaumatophyllum spruceanum. And you might be able to see it here, and this might not seem like the most exciting plant to a lot of people, but you might be able to see that this, by the way, is one leaf. So it's one petiole, and all of these little leaflets are technically part of one leaf. This is one leaf. And what you can get with this, and hopefully I'll see if I can find a picture of a mature form, these leaves or leaflets can actually go all the way around. It's very, very unusual and interesting structure. This was originally mislabeled for many years as a Philodendron goldii, but it is a Thaumatophyllum spruceanum, basically. And it's very, very cool. And I don't know whether or not it's to do with, I haven't seen too many Thaumatophyllum examples, but if it's coming from an ancient Greek word, thauma means miracle or kind of wonder, but probably more miracle. And phylum is philo, which is leaf, basically. So if it is coming from an ancient Greek word, thaumatophyllum, it just means kind of miraculous leaves. And I would imagine if all thaumatophyllums have got kind of interesting foliage, it might be why they're called that. I might be entirely wrong, but you know me, I like to bring in the language whenever I can. But yeah, before I put this down, super, super easy to grow. It took a while to get used to the semi-hydro, but after that initial period, and you can see the roots for days. Super, super happy now. Next one on the list, and I have shown this several times, you're probably a bit bored of me hearing this, is my Monstera pinnatipartita. Another fantastic name. And I do swear there's a lot of people when we talk to our friends and we kind of start rambling with some of these things, they're just, are you talking in tongues? No, it's botanical terms, yeah. Monstera pinnatipartita. But yeah, this is a very, very cool plant. The way that it grows, and I will show you the kind of how it's growing. Before you say anything, yes, one of the many things that I'm finally going to have some time to do over the festive period, because running my own business means that generally I don't take that many days off work. But days like this, between kind of Christmas and New Year's, I am taking the whole time off, which means I am going to be in comfy clothes with audiobooks in my ear, doing a whole bunch of pottering around my plants, and nobody's going to be disturbing me. This is going to be great. I'm going to be doing moss poles, I'm going to be doing repots. I know this is probably not the right time of the year, but this is the only time I've got time to do it. So let me be me and let me enjoy it. But yeah, the pinnatipartita, the way that it grows, the leaves are very similar to that kind of Monstera spar Peru thing, slightly corrugated, very leathery, just a great plant. And the fact that it grows into that kind of slight an arachnoid kind of situation based on how close all the nodes are, tick, 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 tick. Amazing plant. Cannot wait for this to grow larger. Even more special because this was a plant swap, and I can't remember what I swapped with it. And I can't remember who I swapped it. I think I do know, and it's somebody who's on Instagram quite a bit as well. So I will see if I can find and put their name somewhere, and just in case somebody can like tap them on the shoulder and go, Memo was talking about your plant. If you do see this, thank you so much. This has brought me no end of joy. And it was tiny, teeny, teeny, tiny when I first got it, but it's doing well. It's doing really, really well. The next one on the top 10 is a Syngonium. And I think this might be Indonesian in terms of its name. And if you are from that part of the world, It might not even be Indonesian. Hopefully the name, I'll put it at the top as well, because, and this is basically a very long-winded way of me saying, I do apologize because I'm about to butcher the name of this Syngonium, but it's a Syngonium, and I'm kind of having to look down because there's no way I'm going to remember this. Ngern Lai Ma? Really sorry. Correct me if you want to down below in terms of the pronunciation, because the N and the G in the beginning of words, I think there's probably a way that we're all supposed to say it, but I just don't know what it is. I'm sorry. But that doesn't take away from the fact that this is an exceptionally cool plant. And you might look at it and just go, it looks like every other Syngonium, but if you look at some of the leaves, and it doesn't always come like this, and I think it's to do with kind of the lighting conditions of where it's growing. They can be very, very thin. There's a slight kind of whitey silveriness to the leaves as well, but just grows so nicely. There's always a bit of like kind of waviness at the end of the leaves, and it kind of almost makes it a bit rough around the edges, basically. But super, super fun plant to grow. It's in semi-hydro, and it's taken a while to get used to the semi-hydro, but generally, I mean, look at it. It's like a little mini forest that's happening at the back there. It's not just one growing point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 growing points, 8 maybe. And I got this from a garden center. And you might say, oh, there's not a lot of foliage there. This is against a wall. I don't need there to be a lot of foliage there. The light is coming this way. So much joy that this plant brings me. And it's the simplest of things. It is just a Syngonium, but this plant has brought me a lot of joy throughout the year. It's had some moments where I'm just like, oh, is it going to get a bit of root rot? Is it not? But I find with a lot of my Syngoniums, even if I think that they've got root rot, that's all that ever happens. I think they've got root rot. There's probably 1 or 2 roots that are rotting away, but generally speaking, as long as there's enough of the plant, I find that they tend to do okay. Next one is a Begonia, and I will be adding a video here because I am not moving this plant. It kind of snapped quite easily. It is also, you should be able to see from the video, looks glorious during the summer period and the spring period. Coming into winter, it goes through an ugly duckling kind of awkward teenager stage, basically, where it's just like, some of my leaves are gonna go a bit crispy. And it used to worry me, but it's done it every summer. I've had that plant nearly 5 years now. So glad I got it. The Begonia melanobullata. Those spikes at the top, that reddiness at the back of the leaves, just fantastic. And the fact that it's slightly hairy as well. It is a rhizomatous begonia. I originally wanted to get the ferox before I found this one. I couldn't find the ferox in the UK. It might be ferox, I don't know how to pronounce it specifically. But that one doesn't get the spikes on the leaves when it's more juvenile. It will eventually get them as it matures, basically. This one has those kind of bullets, I don't know how to pronounce that word, but the spikiness from a very young age, basically. So that's always been there. Super cool plant. And we've talked about this in some of my other videos, how a lot of the time some of the plants that we've got in our collections we find interesting, for a lot of other people, they're just like, it's just green. And a lot of the times the most common plants that might look a bit zany, they're just like, oh, what is that? That is one of the plants that isn't a common plant that people look at my collection and just go, what is that? That looks cool. Begonia melanobullata. Absolutely amazing. And the next one, I'm debating whether I'm going to lift it up again. I really should, shouldn't I? I do have a video as well that will put it in a minute on the side there, but let me lift this up. Right, done this on so many videos now. The Epipremnum, and I'm having to crouch down so you can see it, the Epipremnum Skeleton Key, whilst I don't decapitate it at the very top. I will put this down now. But yeah, the Epipremnum, I had to put it down. A, too heavy, and B, I'm worried that it's going to like get destroyed by me waving it around. The Epipremnum Skeleton Key, it was a plant that I have wanted for a very long time, like 4 or 5 years minimum, I think, when it first came to my attention. And I think it was through Legends of Monstera. I don't know if Legends of Monstera is still posting videos. I used to love the videos that Legends of Monstera used to like post. But I think there was a plant that was sent, and it was a cutting, and it had that kind of the skeleton key vibe to it, but apparently it doesn't ship particularly well, even for an Epipremnum. So I wanted to get one, and I found they eventually started coming onto the market for small rooted kind of cuttings, but they were the juvenile form, and I ain't got no patience. People that have been here for a while, hi, you know this. But I wanted to get one that was already in its more mature form, and I did manage to pick one up this year. OG, that is Grow Tropicals, managed to bring them in moss poles. I don't know how long they were around for, but I think they got snapped up relatively quickly. And they were a decent price as well for what they were. So got that. Super happy I've got that. Super happy I've got that. Some of the lower leaves, and maybe one or two have yellowed it off, but the plant overall seems to be super happy. I even took a cutting, like a top cutting, for a lovely individual that I have seen at the London plant swaps all the time, who I know has got an obsession, collects vigorously the Epipremnums, and I'm just like, ooh, do you have one that's already kind of got the mature form? Hopefully, if I give you a top cutting, it will kind of shorten up that period. And they were just like, oh yeah, I've got it, but it's not quite there. I'm just like, there you go. And then that individual gave me an Epipremnum no ID kind of cutting with roots on it as well. So I'm growing that out as well. Showed me some pictures, absolutely amazing. Hopefully I will get it to that stage, but it's a while away. That's another one of those plants that needs to get a moss pole attached to it relatively quickly. And I'll finish off with a Piper. And the people that have been here for my video with edible houseplants will know this one. And this one I've come to fascinate me. It doesn't smell when it's like that. I'm not going to bite into it now. I found that out the interesting way. So the Piper sarmentosum, very cool kind of textured leaves as well. And and I know some people kind of like from the Far East that might watch my video, somebody was saying they're just like, this grows like weeds where we are. And I'm just like, I'm so jealous. But yeah, edible. A houseplant that is beautiful. Slightly different from the other kind of the more traditional pipers that we might know of, the sylvaticum, the crocatum. But yeah, this one, very, very cool. I remember for that video, I kind of decided to do a thumbnail and like bit down on one of the leaves. And obviously very similar to mint, when you bite into it, it kind of like releases the scent and the flavor. And it doesn't smell of anything. It smells slightly herbaceous, if that makes sense. But yeah, biting into this, amazing. Another Grow Tropical purchase, ironically enough. And it wasn't a plant that I was even aware of. They just had it. It was kind of expensive for what I wanted. I'm just like, it's interesting, but it's a bit expensive. And then eventually dropped price. I think I might have got the last one that they had. And when I was searching a bit more about this plant, deciding before I bought it whether or not I should buy it, and we were just like, oh yeah, people use this, and they take the leaves because they're quite large, almost a bit like dolmas and kind of vine leaves, and they would cut that and they would wrap kind of, I think it's usually like kind of mincemeat, and they would put it on the barbecue. I think it might be Indonesia, Singapore, or Vietnam, or maybe all of those countries or that region of the world will use this. There is a word that they use for it. I cannot remember now. But yeah, that's one way of doing it. I did that in my air fryer with the mince. I found a traditional recipe, did it properly. Smelled amazing. Oh. I will say, however, very much like a curry smell, this lingers for the next few days. So I think a lot of people will do this, kind of like street vendors will do this for food, and they'll do it on charcoal and kind of more like a barbecue thing. I kind of get why now, because it does linger for a few days. It's not an unpleasant smell. It's just you're going to be with that smell for a few days. I was completely fine with that. But I think you can also eat this chopped up raw in salads. Just kind of gives that extra sense of that smell and that flavor. I've not tried that. We'll be trying that next year. But yeah, very, very cool plant. So glad I got this. And a bit of a weird and kooky one, basically. But yeah, that was my top 10 plants for 2023. Some of them had stories of struggle and success and all of the above. Some of them I've had for a long time. Some of them are relatively new this year. But these are the plants that, for the majority of 2023, have kept my attention and my love throughout, basically. Most of these, I think pretty much all of these. Looking at my list down below, yeah, all easy plants. Some of my easiest plants, I will say, so far anyway. None of them have shown me teeth basically yet, but some of my easiest plants and interesting foliage. It keeps my interest going. Most of them tend to be relatively fast growing as well. So yeah, for all of these reasons, these are my top 10. What are yours? I am very, very curious. What have yours been? And there's no right or wrong answer with this one. It is a personal choice and a personal truth. Let us all know down below. And hopefully, by doing that, we might all go, ooh, that's a plant I've never heard of before. There's going to be a lot of Googling, I think, from the comments down below. But yes, do let us all know down below. And yeah, hopefully, I don't know when this is going to come up. It might be close to the festive season. So whatever you might celebrate during this period of the year, I hope you have a great holiday period, time. Hopefully I'll be able to refilm the other two videos, so you might get some in between the kind of 25th and 31st. Fingers crossed. If not, because I want to film and edit them before the end of this week, because ideally I do not want to be filming and editing at the time when I'm going to be pottering. But yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you all here soon. And I hope that you have the greatest rest of the day and a great holiday period. Thanks. Bye.